Welcome to this video tutorial with Virtual Racing School for the GTE class of the IMSA Sports Car Championship on iRacing. This week takes us to Circuit Gilles Villeneuve in Montreal, where I'll be looking at a lap by Rens Broekman with the Ferrari 488 GTE, for which he's driven in default morning weather to match the official series. I'll play the lap in full for you first before then going into further analysis. Okay, so that was a 131.150. Starting off then, as ever, from the list of data packs on the VRS app, we're going to choose the Ferrari by Rens Broekman for IMSA, and we're going to choose week 9. This will load up the session details, where, as ever, you can download the lap files to compare your driving in sim, the replay, and the race setup. So we're going to click on Learn Track. This will load up the driving analyzer. It'll start to play the lap through. I'm just going to pause it and slow it to half speed and mute it. Now you've got a bunch of telemetry traces that you can see here. You've got the steering angle input trace, speed, brake and throttle inputs, and live driving inputs as well. So it's jumped to the first sector. We're just going to go back to the start of the lap and play it through. Now, it's worth me noting, as you cross the start-finish line, you want to have the car quite far over to left-hand side. That's so that you can open up the braking zone into turn 1 nicely. So you can see that if I just switch to chase view and go back to the beginning, you can see that Rens is fairly far over to left and is turning right. And then when he starts to apply the brakes, he's pretty much aiming to the very outside edge, which is going to be a nice wide corner entry into turn 1. And in terms of a braking reference, you've got various tarmac sections or asphalt sections on the right hand side that you can use as a reference. Here Rens is braking about halfway along the grass or just before the 2 marker. Play it through. So braking quite hard initially in a straight line, and then as we sort of reach the second asphalt section on the right, Rens begins to turn in, and you'll notice that as he turns in, he gradually bleeds off the brakes, aiming for this curb on the inside here, down into second gear. And you'll notice that as he takes the curb, he's completely off both pedals, so that keeps the car nice and stable. So we'll play it through. Just be aware that if you cut this curb too much, it can really upset the car badly. The inside edge of the curb is very sharp, so Rens got away with it nicely, and you can help keep the car stable, as I said, by keeping both pedals free. Down into first gear for the next right-hander, which is extremely tight, so you need to hit the brakes gently again, briefly, and then your focus here should just be about keeping it really tight all the way around. So it's important not to carry too much speed into here. And you can pick up the throttle nice and early. We can see that Rens is kind of almost aiming at this grandstand at the outside of the circuit when he picks up the throttle. but doesn't commit too much, is only about 50% here because he doesn't want to run too wide too early. So it keeps it tight. Only once you sort of see this curb end and you see this bridge appear can you really commit to full throttle, which we can see from Rens. But despite that, it still opens the car up, so you want to avoid wheel spin as much as possible, so you want to open the car up. Down now towards the first proper chicane of the circuit. It's jumped to the next sector, and you can see in terms of a braking reference, we'll just go back, there is a number 2 on the left. Rens brakes just after that. I suggest that you don't use the shadows because you obviously the sky can change and you'll have lost your reference. So braking only about 50% again here. This car does not have ABS, and if you do lock up you'll get an indication on the dash with some blue lights. So play it through again. Nice fairly early turn in because you want to take a decent amount of this first curb and the second curb. In fact, you really want to straight line this chicane as much as possible, but these curbs are very aggressive, so once again when you're on the curb be very careful with the pedals. And again, it's got a sharp inside edge, so just be cautious with that. Through second gear, leaving it in second gear and really aiming to take a lot of the second curb. And you can see again, as he takes the curb itself, he just feathers out of the throttle to keep the car nice and stable. Play it through and then pretty much run it as close to the wall as you can, and in terms of getting on the power you want to be as early on the throttle as you can so that you take full advantage of the track width. Rens isn't actually steering the car out to this wall, it's the speed of the car that's forcing him to use all of the circuit here, and we can see he does get very close to the wall there but gets away with it. Aim for this curb on the left which opens up the right hander, but don't turn in too late. You should be able to take it flat out easily if you time your turn in nicely. In terms of the Button Vettel chicane is what I'm going to call it, you've got another reference that you can use here. You've got this barrier on the left, it has some orange paint. That's pretty much when Rens is going to brake, or just after, and you can see a really nice smooth brake trace from Rens here. He brakes hard initially, and then as the speed comes off, as the downforce comes off, he bleeds off and then bleeds off progressively more as he starts to turn in. So you can see as he's turning in more and more, he's bleeding off the brake more and more. So you don't want to turn in too early for this, you want a fairly late apex, but you do want to be down into first gear for best rotation, brake all the way into the apex. We can see that there's very minimal, well no coasting at all, and he keeps the car fairly tight through the exit of the first left so that he opens up the following right. Up into second gear before the curb finishes, and notice that he has lifted out of the throttle as he's done so, as he's had that gear shift, because the car can get really unsettled through the exit here. It's very difficult to get the power down, even though the circuit kind of opens up. It's very easy to get oversteer here. So again, you got all this track on the exit available to use. Just be aware of the grass, and then just take the path of least resistance, basically the straightest route to the next chicane. Obviously there's many chicanes at this circuit. You're spotting your braking zone, which is going to be shortly before the bridge overhead. I'm just going to pause it there. So you've got a 2 marker as well, braking just before there. Again, not turning in too early. Generally, if you need a reference, I use where this grass on the left-hand side begins to turn in, and then you can really attack the curbs in this chicane. So you can see again, no coasting, trail braking all the way. He's had to bleed off a lot to avoid a lockup, but he's not coasting at all. And yeah, he's really got the whole car pretty much on this curb. Now you can't attack the curb too much because you will get penalized, but this is definitely okay. So, and then through the exit, just be a bit more cautious with this curb on the left. You can see that Rens is feathering out of the throttle as he's on the curb there, just in anticipation of some oversteer. Open the car up, be aware of the scrape marks on the exit wall. You don't want to do the same. And then just take a nice smooth path. You don't want to turn in too soon because you want to start your braking into the hairpin in a straight line, and you need a wide entry to do that. So very, very similar to braking for turn 1. And then you've got a tarmac area or an asphalt area on the left. You've also got this 2 marker on the left as well. Rens is braking a few car lengths before there. So threshold braking all the way down here, all the way down into first gear, and a fairly late turn in. It's important that you get a very good exit here, so you want a fairly late apex. You can see that Rens' apex is very late there, but he's already picked up the throttle just before he apexes, so the car's already starting to tighten, which means that he's had to slow the car down enough on the brakes here, minimal coasting, to get the car rotated before then picking up the throttle. And of course the track does open up on the exit. We are in first gear, so there's a little bit of modulation, but gets to full throttle pretty early and opens the car up, taking advantage of that extra runoff. Just going to speed it up to normal playback speed now. Obviously keep the car over to the right hand side, and then take the most direct route to the braking zone, which is going to be just after the Dodge bridge. I'm just going to slow it down to half speed again before pressing play. So we just passed the 3 marker, which is going to be our braking reference into here. You'll notice that Rens spikes with a bit too much brake pressure initially. Ignore that. He's just finding his threshold point at that moment. So really, threshold braking in this car is about 50-60%. Any more than that and you'll risk locking up. So turning in about at the number 1 marker if you need a reference for that. And again, you can really attack at least the entry curb through this final chicane. So I'll just show you just how much of the car he has on the white sausage part of this curb. And again, when you're on the curbs, be very careful with the pedals. So we can see that Rens hasn't committed to too much throttle at this point. Play it through, the car gets a little bit unsettled, but the Ferrari handles curbs pretty well, to be honest. So as long as you have the car on a nice smooth line through there, you should be able to get away with that amount of curb. We're also in second gear, but a bit less curb through the final part of the chicane. And again, we can see some hesitation in the throttle. It's waiting for the car to settle, and if you've nailed it, then the car should run out all the way to this wall on the exit, so called the Wall of Champions, where you should be comfortably full throttle at that moment. Obviously you don't want to take the car quite close to it to take full advantage of getting on throttle as early as possible, and then across the line to complete the lap. You can find all setups, replays and telemetry for your own use and analysis on virtualracerschool.com, where you can also book coaching, including group classes with world champions from the likes of Coanda Simsport. Good luck for this week, and feel free to post any questions or comments below. Thanks for watching.